But thank you very much, Marissa. Today's focus is all going to be on roundabouts. Now, of course, roundabouts are an intersection configuration, so we could have, just injected this component of the content within our previous module, which was intersections, but we're deliberately created our own area here, or a separate module, because there's quite significant risks that we need to be on top of, and we need to be aware of, that really are only apparent at roundabouts and not really within the intersection space. There's no Wally today, so no need to strain your eyes looking out for our wee pal. He's gone back into the burrow, and he's having a long weekend, so he's going to take it easy. So don't worry about finding Wally. You won't see him. We had a couple examples for the previous 360-degree footage, riding through Melbourne's protected intersection, and then also performing a hook turn, I guess a more conventional intersection. Yeah, just interested if you've got any insights on that, how you found riding in those environments. If you had any issues with getting the 360 to work, it'd be good. The agenda today is actually going to follow quite a similar flow to what we did with our previous session. We're going to be talking a lot about this idea of a protected roundabout. We're going to really going into the design considerations associated with the protected roundabouts. Look at some international examples, as well as Melbourne's protected roundabout. From there, we will actually talk bigger roundabouts, so things like multi-lane roundabouts, and how we can actually safely manage those conflict points with bicycle traffic. Finish off the session, we'll have a quick chat around local roundabouts and some ways that we can deal with riding in those environments. About 10 years old now, VicRoads did release a document, Guidance on Bicycle and Pedestrian Treatments at Roundabouts. I was actually working at VicRoads at the time and helped work on this document. So pretty familiar with it. It is a little bit outdated, but nonetheless, there's some good facts and figures. For those that have been, involved in cycling design, that there's bits and pieces everywhere, and this is a good resource to kind of, I guess, consolidate a lot of the thinking, specifically within roundabouts. So very, very good piece to touch on. We'll be referring to that today, as well as the Austroads research report, Bicycle Safety at Roundabouts. So yeah, I spoke about this with the wayfinding. When Austroads decide to invest in, lots of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to conduct a research report, it kind of speaks volumes to that issue. So they've acknowledged that bicycle safety at roundabouts is a considerable risk, and we need to really reflect on our practices to ensure that we're mitigating those risks as best as we can. Okie dokie. So protected roundabouts, I thought I would just start the day off by acknowledging, well, this is the general look and feel of what a protected roundabout looks like. And just so we're all familiar with the terminology and words that I'll be using today, this area here where all your traffic flows, that's referred to as the circulating area of the roundabout. And traditionally, we've had bike riders in that space as well. A protected roundabout is all about getting riders out of that circulating area, because it's just far too difficult to be able to manage those conflict points and those awkward sight lines if you've got bike riders in the circulating area. So you'll see within this example, bike riders actually get this separate kind of off-road facility. They are not being encouraged at all to enter the circulating area. Instead, they've got this off-road separated path. And also, in this specific example, all of the conflict points are raised up. That's not a prerequisite, but that is the case in this image. This is Melbourne's protected roundabout. Spoken about it before, why we love the raised crossing points so much. It's a very, very effective way to slow down vehicles, and much more likely for vehicles to actually be yielding and giving way to pedestrians and riders crossing at that location. So rather than just rely on signs and the goodwill of road users in that space, you've got the physical raised platforms there. So you're actually much more likely to get general traffic slowing those at those areas. So just the takeaways at this point before we get into all the details is we're getting riders away from the circulating area. We don't like them in there. And we're also giving them the priority across all of the legs so that they don't have to, start and stop their journey. They can just ride across all of those legs. They've got the priority there. All right, we might kickstart with a poll. In this figure here, we've got 3 cyclists, 3 bike riders. The bike rider A there, bike rider B just adjacent the splitter island, and bike rider C. So I've got 3 riders in there, and the poll should have just jumped up on your screen, and it's asking, which cyclist do you believe is most at risk? Which rider has the highest risk level? I'll give you 23 seconds to give that a go. And see a quick question that I might just pause there about if the protected roundabout creates queuing issues, and the answer to that is yes, it certainly may. As you've correctly pointed out, you've got to yield the peds and cyclists as they're crossing over, and that means you could be blocking the circulating area. So you may create those queuing issues, but that is not the objective of these types of infrastructure projects. It's not being set up to improve that congestion or anything like that. If you are looking for protected roundabouts, your main objective is the priority and safety of vulnerable road users, of pedestrians and cyclists crossing all over those legs. So there's going to be a bit of a balance there about how you kind of sell that and how your specific project can manage that. All right, we might end the poll there and we can just share the results. And yep, great. It's good to see that we've got a bit of disparity there. We've got some different views and opinions, and I don't think there's a right answer in this. I think there's a case for all of those riders being most at risk. So I'll just chat through them. The rider in position A, the reason that they would be, at risk in this scenario is the vehicle that is in the yellow vehicle. I'm not sure if you'd call that the outside or the inside lane, but the curbside lane there. their focus is to the right of them. You can actually see those triangles there. That's representative of where they're kind of paying attention. They're not looking for anyone that's kind of directly in front of them, which is exactly where A is. And also, if you kind of look carefully, you can see in this scenario, I'm going to call that a purple vehicle. The purple vehicle has already started to enter the roundabout. So the yellow vehicle may just take that as a cue, I'm good to go, and completely ignore, anything else that's going on in front of them, significantly increasing the risk of a collision with the rider at that location. So I think there's validity in saying that one. Rider B, I completely agree, is definitely in an awkward scenario because it looks like they're about to ride straight into the purple vehicle. Maybe they're just going really slowly and they're going to avoid a collision. But you can also see they're not really in the sight lines of the red vehicle coming behind as well. So all of those vehicles are basically looking in a relatively narrow field of vision for oncoming vehicles. They're not exclusively looking for bikes, which is how bikes can easily get hidden in roundabouts. The rider C, so there's a few different scenarios where the rider C may be impacted. The yellow one could come out, and that's where that type of collision can occur. Sideswipe crashes can occur. So just the orange vehicle failing to maintain, within their traffic lane. But also if we just put C back a little bit, as that blue vehicle is exiting, there's that possibility of a collision there. So I really think it's good that we're seeing people have different opinions of what would be the highest risk. And I'm not sure there is one correct answer there because they are all quite high-risk scenarios to be in. And exactly why we're saying a protected roundabout is considered best practice because we're not putting riders in the circulating area whatsoever. To further, I suppose, back up some of those claims, 10 years ago, Austroads did some analysis on the crash data occurring at roundabouts. And what we're seeing here is the solid line, the solid red arrow that we can see there. That represents a vehicle, and the dotted green line, that represents a bicycle rider. So they've taken all these crash data reports and they've basically tried to categorize, well, what are the most common crash types occurring for bike riders at roundabouts? Overwhelmingly, the most common crash type that we are seeing is entering motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists. That's about 68%. What that is a motor vehicle, a vehicle that's at the hold line, so they're at the give way. They are looking into the roundabout. They don't see any cars, and so they enter the roundabout. It's this phenomenon known as looking but not seeing. It's basically we have been trained as drivers and growing up on a predominantly vehicle-based network. We look for cars. When we cross the road, we look for cars. When we're entering a new traffic stream, we're looking for cars. It's the big metal cage that we are, programmed to look for. And so when we have people that are traveling in that space and they don't fit that big metal cage mold, they're on a small, narrow bicycle, or they're on a motorbike, it also applies to motorbikes as well. We actually don't see them. We don't process that as we need to give way to them. It just falls into the background. It's very, very interesting. There's lots of YouTube videos if you want to go down that rabbit hole. to kind of back that up. But yeah, there's lots of studies being done within that space that we don't process that information. It's a much more cognitive effort to be like, I need to look for vehicles, I need to look for bike riders. So it's this look but fail to see type of crash, or failing to give way, just not even slowing down and prepared to give way, just going straight through the roundabout and colliding with a bike rider there. So 68% there. Cyclists crossing as a pedestrian. It could be in either direction there. The reason that this one may be occurring, or there's multiple reasons, but it's not uncommon to have sightline obstructions at the roundabout. You can have vegetation and things like that that can block the sight line. So bike riders aren't 100% sure if they've got the good to go, or drivers can also not see them. But also what's really very common, as the vehicle is exiting the roundabout, that motorist is shifting from the brake to the accelerator. So they're thinking about going faster now. That's where they're putting their energy. They're picking up speed, and they're not expecting to see either a pedestrian or a cyclist crossing at that location. So that is about 8% of the crashes occurring. And it's also, I should add, like a pretty significant issue for pedestrians as well. Pedestrians also do not fare very well at roundabouts. It's not just bike riders, and that's one of the big issues for pedestrians, is that type of collision. Exiting motor vehicle versus circulating cyclists. Now, this one is only at 9%, but anecdotally, this is the one that stresses me out the most when I'm riding in a roundabout. Particularly if I was riding and turning right. I'll see if I can annotate this drawing. I know there's lots of arrows there already. Let's say I was cycling along and I wanted to turn right like that. What this crash type is saying is a motor vehicle that could be following from behind, but they're going through. That type of crash. I get so nervous in those scenarios because it's just impossible for me to turn around and try and make eye contact that they're going to give way, or, have they seen me put up my right hand, indicating that I'm crossing over the exit lane? Yeah, so that's the one that stresses me out the most. But very interestingly, it's only around 9% of those crash types that have been identified. So it's not seen as the most prevalent cause of trauma within the roundabout. It's good to have that and acknowledge that you might be biased in the way that you identify risks. It's the other side of the roundabout where you might have more issues. 10% side swipe within the roundabout. So that's just a motor vehicle failing to stay within their traffic lane and colliding with a bike rider there. So about 1 in 10 crashes related to that. So anyway, you put it, putting riders within the circulating area is really very, very difficult to manage safely unless it's at incredibly low speeds and low traffic volumes. And in those scenarios, you don't want them in the periphery of the roundabout. You want them right in the middle, in the traffic lane, claiming the traffic lane. And we'll show you some examples of that later on today. So protected roundabouts, this is not an example of a protected roundabout. This is an example of grade separation. This is the Hovenring in the Netherlands. And I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate or remind, if you are talking about, managing a cycling shared path network or connection, and it's interacting with a motorway or a significant movement corridor, I don't think we can be doing that at grade. Like, we really do need to be doing grade separation, and we shouldn't be looking at, trying to make little tweaks to make things a little bit better. We should be going for grade separation. It doesn't have to look like this. It can be underpasses. This one just looks very beautiful. But this is not an example of a protected roundabout. So I'll just clarify that. The protected roundabout, it doesn't involve grade separation. However, if you are in those very, very high speed environments and you need to maintain that movement, you should be looking at this as an option. It should be investigated. A protected roundabout looks more like this. So what we can see here is a separated bicycle facility that has been provided. As the rider is getting closer and closer to the give way or the hold line, you can see that they are being diverted away from the circulating area. So they're getting taken away from that general traffic stream, and they're crossing with priority over the carriageway. So you're not forcing the bike rider to stop and dismount or anything like that and give way to traffic. It's actually one smooth ride through all of this roundabout area. There's a few, I suppose, key items here, and there's less important items. So I'm just going to chat through this and also translate it, because this is from an American document, and it's not quite the way that we would phrase things, and also not quite the way that we would design things. But the principles hold up. So number one, we've got a bicycle crossing point. As I spoke about with the protected intersections, we want to make sure we've got separate pedestrian, separate cyclist points. We don't want to just share this space. It's very good practice to separate those two users. Number two, yield lines. We would use give way line marking as in combination with give way signs and things like that. That is just awarding the priority to pedestrians and to bike riders as they're crossing over this location. Number three, I'm going to cross off, because you wouldn't put a hold line there for bicycles. You would do one or the other. You don't want to create ambiguity. You want to make sure it's either the cars have got the priority and you're forcing bicycles to yield, or cyclists have the priority, you're forcing general traffic to yield. You don't want to provide both of those hold lines. Make things ambiguous, because you potentially run the risk of both of the users stopping. No one's sure when they're going to go, and then it's just this awkward interaction. So definitely want to pick one or the other there. Number four is a 5-foot curb radius. The reason that's mentioned is you don't want to create deviations that are too sharp or angular, just because it's not a comfortable riding experience. But just take that one with a grain of salt, I guess. Number five, I wouldn't say is essential. It's referred to as a channelizing island. And the reason that's been incorporated is to just clearly delineate where the pedestrian facility is and where the cycling facility is. So we would generally just use line marking. Introducing an additional curb there, I think, could be seen as a tripping hazard. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's the most critical feature, but certainly the function of it is important. Final one is just signage. Depending on which jurisdiction you're in, you'd use different signage there, but certainly need to include the give way, just so it's crystal clear that's where the priority is. All right, I'm going to get into some examples, and I'm actually going to show you, I guess, different scales of the protected roundabout. So this is an example in the Netherlands, in Assen, where you've got a large footprint. So this is actually a lot of space, and it doesn't always need to look like this. And I just want to give you some tips and some things to look out for if you are working within, I suppose, a larger footprint. So I might just start by showing, the path that a bike rider might use turning right. So if you were riding up along here, you could be turning right and you'd have priority across all of those legs. You could do something like that. This particular example is actually bi-directional, so you can travel in both directions, all of those different legs there. So you could also just go like this and, potentially shave off some time there, which is pretty handy. Quite a big distance to actually cover though, because of this large footprint. And what we can see is a different color is if we had some circulating vehicles, which we can see are in the circulating area, and let's just say they're exiting at this leg here, where they're crossing over the conflict points, once again, we're managing to achieve a very good conflict angle. It's basically perpendicular. Said it a few times, where we're able to achieve that 90-degree or close to 90-degree conflict angle, we're drastically improving the ability for drivers to be able to see riders that are crossing, because it's happening right in front of them. It's just much easier to see. So that's a big positive for this design. What we're actually looking at in terms of the geometry of the space to the conflict point. So I'm going to refer to this distance from the circulating area to where the conflict point is. That distance there, I'm just going to use the term offset, just to make it easy. So that offset between where the conflict point and where the circulating area is, it's around 2 vehicles long. And the reason I know that is if you look at the other side of the roundabout, you can see about 2 vehicles are on the approach. So it's roughly 2 vehicles long. General rule of thumb would be to keep it around 1 vehicle long. Now, we already spoke to before about this idea of, well, what about all the congestion that could be occurring and blocking the circulating area? That is valid, and that is perhaps areas where you may increase that offset to then reduce the risk of that queuing. Okay. The caveat there is, let's just say this is an area that is known for its queuing and it's, deemed a significant risk. And we do want to push the conflict point further and further away, just so that we can get more vehicles queued up before they block the circulating area. So let's say instead we push the offset all the way to there. And then we can get cars queuing. Maybe it takes 5 or 6 cars before they start to block the circulating area. The issue with this as an approach is now your bike rider has to travel or detour much further, which is not a great experience. Like it's just annoying to have to ride 50 meters out of your way just to cross over the carriageway because of that potential queuing effect. So I'd be hesitant to go with that queuing philosophy as my go-to, because you really don't want to detract from the facility itself. You potentially run the risk of riders ignoring it and just going on road. The other issue with bringing the conflict point or that offset, making that too far away, let's say this was free flow conditions and there's no queuing occurring. A vehicle that's exiting this leg, by the time they get to that conflict point, they have picked up considerable speed. And unless there is a raised, crossing point, something that slows them down again, unless there is that vertical deflection, it's increasingly unlikely that they are going to yield just based on a giveaway sign. Much more likely if it's at lower speeds and it's closer to the circulating area. But the further you push it away, the higher those speeds are, the less likely you'll actually get motorists yielding. So in this scenario, we've got two vehicles. That's kind of been used as the storage area, or that offset. General rule of thumb would be to have one vehicle. So around 6 meter offset, something like that. Here's what this one looks like out on the ground. So you can see it's it is quite a bit of space required in this scenario, but it's fairly well delineated and articulated exactly where riders should be traveling. And also there's not a lot of incentive if you are riding to actually hop onto the carriageway itself, because the protected facility is it just looks much more attractive. We'll go down to the other side of the scale where we are in a more confined or constrained environment. So this is also in the Netherlands. This is just outside Rotterdam. And here we've got a footprint that is much narrower. We're in a built environment. So you can see, building envelopes on all quadrants of this roundabout here. And if we have a look at the circulating area, the adjacent bicycle facility is basically just a direct offset or, concentric circle of that circulating area. That is beneficial in terms of, I mentioned before that riders like, a smooth radius as they're riding through different things. This is quite attractive in that scenario because you've just got one smooth curve to negotiate and you're not having to do these weird little turns and things like that we saw in the other example. But the disbenefit is this is a very, very small offset. So the offset is just where the bicycle or the conflict point is and where the circulating area is. And it is actually incredibly convenient that in this aerial that I happen to get, you can see that the white vehicle there is exiting the roundabout. And you can also see that there is a bike rider within that protected facility. So as this bike rider is heading around this ring, they might be traveling through there. It's almost impossible for that white vehicle to make eye contact and, acknowledge that that rider is there. Even if that rider was here, very, very difficult to be able to kind of facilitate that. So if you bring the offset too close to the circulating area, then you do really impact on those sight lines, and it can be quite difficult to feel that confidence as a rider that you're going to be able to see motorists yielding towards you. I thought I'd just show kind of a demonstration of what I was talking about out on the ground here. So I've got this little Porsche driver in the circulating area, and let's just say they were exiting at this leg here. It's very difficult if you were driving that Porsche to be able to make eye contact and see the bike rider that's in that adjacent lane. And they would have right away in this scenario. They are awarded the priority. So something to be mindful of is if you're adopting too small an offset there, that those sight lines may not be achieved. Got a third example here, and this is, I suppose, the one in the middle. So we had the example with quite a large footprint and then quite a narrow footprint. This is, I suppose, that happy middle ground. And it's more or less that 6 meter offset that I spoke about before. So basically allowing enough room for one storage vehicle. And yeah, that's enough. So in this design here, this one is actually in Cambridge in the UK. It's Fendon Road, if you're interested. It opened a couple of years ago. They've got this one outer ring, so similar to the previous construction. So that's quite a comfortable experience for riders. And you can see that the kind of storage area there, it's really only enough space there for one vehicle at a time. So if there's more than one vehicle, it's likely there could be queuing. But as I spoke to at the start of the module, it wasn't really the objective for this project. And yeah, I think that's important to acknowledge, because there's in fact a lot of different cycling treatments that can have impacts on things like congestion, parking, and I don't think that's a reason not to investigate it. I just think we need to be clear on what our project objectives are, and if it is cycling safety, then that's okay. We can still prioritize these types of treatments. I'll show you what this one looks like out on the ground, and I think this one, does a pretty good job of demonstrating how easy it is for that driver there to be able to see bicycle riders and pedestrians that could be crossing directly in front of them. So it's no longer in the blind spot, it's right in front of them. So much, much easier to see them. All right, I'll show this little video. So this is just an example of protected roundabout. And I suppose wanted to highlight that, these things are built, they exist, they're very, very common in other places in the Netherlands, Denmark, and we've got one in Victoria. We've got two in Victoria now. Actually, we've got more than two, sorry, we've got a few. And yeah, they're not a hypothetical or just an academic type of thing. They work, people get used to it, traffic gets used to it. It's a much improved environment for riders within this space. I'll check in with Ainsley and Marissa to see if we've got any questions while this one rolls on.
We've been relatively quiet on the questions so far, Max, but we did have one a little bit earlier on, just about where there is roundabouts that have multiple lanes. Which one do you believe is safer for the cyclists? Is it the inside or the outside lane?
So multi-lane roundabouts, they're incredibly poorly for riders. And actually, we've got some comments coming up in a few slides' time just about how we can manage those interactions. I don't think there's a real safe spot to put riders in the roundabout at all when it comes to multi-lane roundabouts. So yeah, I might wait to see till we get up to those slides.
No worries. Well, that's all for now.
Promise. Yeah, so just wanted to reiterate that, that they do exist. In this example as well, it's pretty interesting to see that this leg, for whatever reason, it seems to have a raised component, something that I'm very fond of. I know it's raised because they've got those piano key line markings that indicates that it's been raised up. And it's also a bit of a combination between unidirectional, so it's one way here, but other aspects of the roundabout allow two directions, so bidirectional. So you can mix and match. You can do a protected bidirectional roundabout. You can give that a go. Yeah, so just wanted you all to know that these are feasible things, and it's more than enough evidence elsewhere to get some insights. All right. Now, I did speak about Melbourne's protected roundabouts. You're actually going to get the opportunity as part of the 360-degree video today to ride through Melbourne's protected roundabout. It's in Moray Street in South Melbourne. And this is an image of what it looked like before the installation. I'm not going to go through the actual project specifics because I talk about it in the video that you'll watch later on today. And also we've got a little case study project sheet that's up on the LMS. So if you do want more info on the actual project, just feel free to download that one off the resources folder. But this is what it looked like beforehand. It is a local environment. I should also clarify that the protected roundabouts are local roundabouts. It's very unlikely you'd see the protected roundabouts in an arterial sense because they tend to have much higher traffic volumes, and also they would have multi-lane capacities, which is not being recommended for protected roundabouts. So local roads, local streets, and lower speeds is what we're looking at here. What we had prior to the installation was these bicycle lanes installed at the periphery of the roundabout. I'm not a fan of peripheral bike lanes at all within roundabouts. I think riders are incredibly well hidden in those areas. So I don't think that they work very well at all. Strongly encourage you to consider other ways to manage that movement, which we'll talk about a bit later on. Anyway, this is what it looks like afterwards. So you can see that there's quite a significant change. I might just go straight to the full-blown version so you can get a good look at it. And I suppose I've spoken quite a lot about the benefits associated with the protected roundabout. But I think it's also important to acknowledge, well, what could be seen as a disadvantage. So I might open it up to everyone in the chat. What is a disadvantage? I'm going to run out of space. Disadvantage. Pretty good. What are the disadvantages or disbenefits associated with installing a protected roundabout from the bike rider's perspective? So nothing to do with congestion or anything like that, but from the bike rider's perspective, what can you see as maybe not being as attractive as just what we saw there before? I'll give you 30 seconds to have a crack. Good feedback. Thank you very much. I like what I'm seeing. I think there's some very relevant points there. I noticed in the chat there just around managing the head movements, and I just thought I'd zoom in on this section. So if you're a rider at this location and you wanted to go through, you'd be going and traveling along this facility, and then you'd have to actually cross over the zebra crossing. So you can see that the zebra marking has been extended over to where that conflict point is, just to give bike riders the heads up that, pedestrians actually have right of way at that conflict, and you would actually need to slow and give way to them. That's theoretically how it all works. And I agree with the principle and theory of all of that, but I also acknowledge it's not always going to work like that, and there may be a bit of ambiguity or a bit of whoever got there first is going to go first. But it's a good point. I also liked the acknowledgement of kind of the angles that are being used for, in this particular example, for the paths of travel for a rider. As I said before, riders much prefer a nice smooth curve that they can just maintain, speed and get around there nice and easy. Having these little weird elbow connections, to me, it's not the end of the world, but some riders absolutely find it very uncomfortable and don't like that. So that's certainly good feedback to hear. But certainly another, I suppose, key disadvantage associated with this, which I can see a lot of people have answered, is just the longer length that you need to ride. So let's say you were coming from the left of the screen and you wanted to do a right turn. You'd be doing something like this. So you'd work your way around, do all those little jagged little corner things, and then turn right. And you do have priority at all of those conflict points, so you don't need to stop and give way to cars, but it's still not as quick as just going into the circulating area and doing that. There's not really a way the protected roundabout is going to completely fix that as an issue, but I still think there's absolute merit in advocating for this facility, because for those people that don't feel comfortable in the circulating area, you're giving them an opportunity to safely access and continue their journey within this environment, and not just, pushing them into a scenario that they don't feel comfortable with. We actually happened to complete an evaluation for this project. So we did some surveys and crash data and analysis and things like that. And one of the things that we were really interested in was, well, how many people are actually using the protected bicycle lane versus what is this person is doing is just continuing to use the circulating area as is. And for riders that were traveling through, so if you're just performing a through movement, we calculated around 91% were using the protected bicycle facility. So 91% were on that green part there. For those riders turning right, this number dropped to about 77%. So 77% were still using the protected facility, and the other 23% were just being like, nah, that's too far for me. I'm going to just claim the traffic lane and just ride through the circulating area. Now, depending on your viewpoint, and there are different arguments within this space, within industry, some people see that as a failure of the project, that they were expecting much higher numbers and 100% compliance, but I don't agree with that. I think you don't get 100% compliance with anything that we do on the transport network. So it's unreasonable to expect that would get that with bike riders or any mode choice through here. I think it's much more important to reflect on, what are your actual qualitative analysis telling you? What do the community feel riding through here? Do they feel much safer using a protected facility? Even if you're not using the protected facility, the fact that you've got these raised crossing points, that's going to slow down vehicles. So you're also safer just to enter the circulating area as well. So by all means, they could feel safer just for the use of that. So yeah, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that 100% compliance, and I don't see it as a failure on the project or anything like that in itself. Now, if you were working in an environment where you did really want to channel riders in and say, I don't want you in the circulating area, full stop, and you do want to get much, much closer to that 100% compliance, I just thought I'd share a way that could be achieved. So the photo on the left is an image of one of the legs as you're approaching the protected roundabout. And you can see all that's being used is some stencils, some text, use bike lane at roundabout. Now, that's incredibly easy to ignore. Like, that is superfluous, really. Because if you wanted to take the circulating area, it is very easy for you to do that. As mentioned, if that was not the objective of the project and you did want to see majority of riders taking the protected lane, What you can do is, if you've got protected facilities approaching the roundabout, you just extend that all the way up. Huh? So you don't put any gaps in that separator. Therefore, more or less, riders get channeled into that protected facility. So it's actually more inconvenient for them to be like, all right, I'm going to pick this little gap to get out, push myself in front of traffic. It's much more unlikely that they would be doing that, and they just take the protected facility. So that there are kind of ways around that if you do need to see significant compliance there. I might pause there. I'll give everyone a 3 minutes halfway break, and then we'll get stuck back into it in 3 minutes time. Welcome back, everyone. Julia in the chat has asked a very relevant question, where if you see some stencil line marking or stencil text that says use bike lane at roundabout, are you legally allowed to ignore that? Well, it's a good question. I always start, I get asked this every now and then, and I always start this by saying I have very little legal counsel knowledge, and so please do not take this as any legal advice. But the road rules do state that a bike rider must use a cycling facility where it is safe or reasonable to do so. If I was a lawyer, I think there's an argument to say either option would be safe or reasonable to do so, because it may be safer for you to avoid the conflict point there with pedestrians where you're uncomfortable, and that's why you're taking the circulating area. You're also maybe a rider at speed. It may be uncomfortable for you to have to slow down and do that deviation and things like that. So that there is a little bit of a gray area as to exactly how that would play out if there was, an incident to occur. And I suppose it depends how good your legal team is if you were being represented in that instance. But generally, yes, bike riders are forced to use the cycling facilities that have been provided. But I think another really good example of that actually is, let's say you've got a shared path, right? And you've got a training cyclist, and they're riding along the shared path. Now, they would be traveling 30, 40 kilometers per hour. Is it safer for them to be on the shared path or riding on road, even if it doesn't have a bicycle lane? The odds are that they would choose the road, and I can see exactly why they would do that, because it probably is safer and more reasonable for them to actually travel in that space. But welcome to anyone else's interpretation. That's just my own 2 cents. We'll move on to the next topic, though. Good question, though. Multi-lane roundabouts. So we've deliberately plucked this out and put it into its own little subcategory here, because there's additional risks that we need to be aware of. And also we've moved away from some historical guidance as well. So I want to make sure we're all up to scratch within this space. I'm going to move the banner away so I can get busy with my pen again. I'm very fond of drawing, in case you haven't noticed. And I'm going to focus on the right-hand side of this roundabout. And we're going to pretend that we're a bicycle rider and we're turning right at this location, which even on the aerial, you might be scared to do, but don't worry, we'll get through it. So, get that out of the way. Let's have a look. It actually starts off pretty well, because the bicycle facility starts off kind of like a footpath. It's just like an off-road, behind the curb, exclusive cycling area. And first thing that draws my attention is, as you're getting closer to the hold line, can you see that the bicycle facility is actually getting narrowed? It gets smaller, which is not a great thing to be doing. You want to maintain that width there. You don't want to be squeezing riders as they're approaching a conflict point. The reason that may have occurred is, during the swept path checks of this roundabout, noted that heavy vehicles need additional traffic lane space to be able to safely perform their turning movements, and where they're going to get that extra space, they can just eat into the bicycle lane. So it's probably how that has occurred, but anyway, that's by the by. The other thing I forgot to mention, sorry, is the off-road facility at that point there, it actually transitions down. So it ramps down and you end up riding on the carriageway. Okay. Other than that, there's only this weird little bicycle lane that is adjacent the splitter islands. Otherwise, it's a bit of a free-for-all. So if you were turning right here, what you may be doing is riding, and then setting yourself up here, turning and crossing over. There's no curb ramps here, so it's not actually, being recommended, but this is one option if you were turning right here. And then you get to that point, stopping again, wait till you get a gap in the traffic before completing the right turn. It's possible that riders would complete that. It's also possible that riders would just turn right. So what I mean by that is they're riding in the bicycle facility and then cross over like this and turn right. Once again, I should clarify, the road rules do not permit this. This is illegal, but it does happen because that is the most direct way to go. I'm sure you can all appreciate why that is absolutely not recommended, because you've got these very fast and tight conflict points there that are just not going to be managed whatsoever. And as a bike rider, you basically need to turn around almost 180 degrees to see if there's any vehicles that are heading through that you could potentially collide with. So very, very precarious, and by no means can that be managed safely with this type of setup. Should have also explained that this is like on the outskirts of a rural township. It's about 80 kilometers per hour here. So it's a fast environment. The third method that riders may use to turn right here is just ignoring this facility altogether. Not even worrying about the off-road bicycle facility, and just getting themselves over into the right turn lane. This is probably the most common way. And then you just treat yourself like a car and ride across like that. Now, the issue with this is you have to force yourself across live traffic lanes in a high-speed environment to be able to get into that right turn lane. And motorists are generally not expecting that because that's where the cycling facility is and you're nowhere near it. All of those options are very poor and have safety implications. So none of these are what is being recommended. I just wanted to show some of the risks associated with that. Now, this is what the site looks like out on the ground. You can see a little bit clearer what I was talking about with the bicycle lane just narrowing on the approach and having that squeezing effect. I don't like that one at all. I also wanted to make a note, just in case anyone noticed, what that hold line there is for. It's got nothing to do with the cycling infrastructure, unfortunately. The reason the hold line there is you can see the signals are there. And in the background, we've got a level rail crossing. So when those boom gates go down, there's basically just a left red turn arrow. So you're not just obviously turning left and crashing into the boom gates or creating a queuing effect and blocking the circulating area. So nothing to do with the bicycle facilities at all. Every now and then that gets picked up and people wonder what's going on there. So that's not a good example at all. And instead, I want to show you a very similar looking environment. This one's just outside of Canberra. Canberra, the capital of roundabouts. And we'll see how the cycling facility is maintained in this scenario. So once again, we've got a bicycle facility. In this case, it's actually an on-road painted lane. And it transitions to an off-road path. Right? This off-road path gets taken away from the circulating area. So very, very similar to what we saw with the protected roundabout. It's like, we cannot manage your conflicts safely within the roundabout, within the circulating area. So we're just going to deviate you, get you away from that. And the difference here is we're not going to award you priority. So a bike rider has to actually stop. There's a little U bollard handle thing, the U rails. For those that don't know, for bike riders that use cleats, they kind of clip into the pedals, and it's just annoying to clip in and clip out. So if you can provide those little rails, so you can just hold that as a bike rider, it just makes it a bit more comfortable. The bike rider is forced to yield. They have to give way and pick a gap in the traffic. Then they can continue their journey. Once again, they stop, they have to yield, and then they can continue their journey like that. So for multi-lane roundabouts, this scenario is actually preferred, just because it's very unlikely you're going to be able to get traffic yielding to pedestrians and to bike riders crossing at those locations. Instead, awarding that priority to general traffic. Now, this is what it looks like out on the ground. And you can see there's a little bit of signage there to say this is the transition point. I can't actually read that, sorry, but it's kind of being, corralling cyclists to take that path. But I think it's actually important to acknowledge that if you were in that group of elite cyclists, super confident, you are not stopped from actually just accessing the traffic lane and riding straight through. Okay, so it's not a perfect outcome by any means. It's saying if you don't want to get into the circulating area, you do not have to. This is another path for you. You will have to give way at every conflict point. We're not going to give you the priority, but you do have that as an option. It's not being forced on all riders, because some riders would see that deviation as just being a hindrance and not at all what they signed up for. So it's not being, exclusively used as that type of route. This figure here, I just wanted to make a note. So basically using bicycle lanes in the periphery of multi-lane roundabouts, that is superseded. So that was from 2011. If you've got any hard copy versions of the Austroads Guide to Road Design, Part 4B, just make sure you put a big cross in the middle of that one, or better yet, just print out a new copy, because that one actually just got removed from the Austroads Guide, as it's fully acknowledged that we cannot safely manage cycling connectivity with that arrangement. So it just got pulled from it altogether, and instead we have that arrangement where we'd rather bring them off-road, not award the priority, and get them crossing. So just a note there. Another little exercise that I like to do with this type of environment is really reflect on the movement and place classification. So for those that have not done movement and place training, or you're not familiar with that term, no stress. I'll give you the 30-second rundown. For those that have done movement and place, you probably know this much better than myself. But it's basically this acknowledgement that our transport network has kind of two quite distinct functions. One is a movement function. So a road or a street has got a movement function. It's about allowing people to get through that area. It's not necessarily just by car. It can be on a bike or just walking along, but it's got a movement function. Our streets and roads can also have a place function. And the place, what that refers to is like, it's somewhere where people want to spend time. They want to, have long walks along an idyllic area. There happens to be a road there, or, there's lots of on-street shopping and restaurants and stuff like that. It's got a real place function where you want to spend time, you want to dwell there, you want to enjoy that space, right? In these scenarios where we've got multi-lane roundabouts, it's likely that if you've got multi-lane, that automatically ticks with me that it's probably a high movement classification. So it's very strategically important to actually maintain the movement through there. Just glancing at this one as an example, I can see that the east-west connection is a multi-lane divided carriageway. So that automatically signals to me that this is a high order road. Like, this one is important. Maybe it's a freight route as well. It's got a lot going on there. So I reckon this would be high speed, and I reckon it would have a lot of traffic going through it. These are just my assumptions. If we look at the north and south leg, it's only single lane each way. And I'm also just going to make an assumption for the purpose of this discussion that the movement function is not as critical for the north-south legs, okay? So east-west, very, very important. North-south, not as important. Maybe we're just connecting to a local residential estate. We're just tying into a local area or something like that. But we're not pushing through trucks here so they can go from the banana farm up in Noosa down to the Coles depot in Moorabbin or whatever. That's my quick synopsis of this environment. Completely fabricated, but it's got a reason, and I'll get to the reason in a sec. The reason I'm mentioning this is because the treatment that we apply on the carriageway can actually reflect those movement classifications. So we'll have a look at what this designer is proposing for where the cyclists are crossing over that motorway, that main movement classification. It's saying, let's install some grab handles for cyclists at the crossing points. In other words, let's award the priority for traffic. We're not going to give the priority there to bike riders. Conversely, if we have a look at what's going on the north-south leg, we can see, if you've got very good eyes, it's a raised crossing point. Give way signage is proposed, as well as the little pedestrian walking symbols for the zebra crossing. And it's saying that a raised crossing with priority given to bicycles and pedestrians crossing the minor road, okay? So where we've got more ability to influence the traffic flow, that's when we can implement the raised crossings and award the priority to vulnerable road users. However, there are some scenarios where we're unable to do that. And unless you can grade separate, which, hey, you've got to spare $30 million, that's great. Unless you can grade separate, then it should be noted that we can't just expect to continually award the priority where you've got those high movement and high speed environments. So this is kind of capturing both of those sentiments at the same site. Another way that I also like to analyze this specific site as well is, as I mentioned, if we look here and we see the east-west being that key movement corridor, well, presumably that same corridor would have similar strategic value for bike riders. So in other words, if you're traveling on a bike east-west, this movement for you should also be considered with that same priority and importance. And because we've got those raised crossings, we are able to maintain those traffic flows, those pedestrian and cyclist traffic flows. So I think this kind of fits in very nicely with the movement in place thinking, and just illustrates that you can have different treatments based on where it fits within that categorization system. All right. Last time we'll get to play this one, which is what's wrong with this photo here. And we've got a confused cyclist there. I'll get her out of the way though, so you can have a good look. And let us know in the chat what you think is wrong with this photo, please. I can see just a note there about the mammal. No, it is not an official term. That one was a design conducted a few years ago by a colleague, and that was the term that they used within that specific project. I have no idea how that got actually, I guess, endorsed within the team itself, but for whatever reason, that was the term that was used. Mammal is middle-aged man in lycra, for those unfamiliar. But yeah, it's a bit peculiar. Right. I may as well ask if anyone knows where this site is as well. It's relatively iconic. Not like the Sydney Harbour Bridge iconic, but it's up there if you're into traffic engineering sites. The Champs-Elysees. It is not the Champs-Elysees. I like the energy though. It's good. Yeah, so I can see a lot of the similar feedback, which is wonderful. Ending of the bike lane, that's not so good. Just putting the stencil there and saying the bike lane has ended. Similar to just giving up at the intersection. That's a very similar approach with the roundabouts as well. Particularly because, people really recognize that designing at roundabouts is challenging. But yeah, putting an end is not the solution to that. So where we are talking about local roundabouts, so we're talking lower speeds, lower volumes and things like that. And let's just say we don't have the resources or the time to be able to do a full-blown protected roundabout design or investigate that. What else can we do within this space? Well, we're not expecting bike riders to disappear completely. So, investigate, can we look at putting riders onto the footpath, getting them away from the circulating area and then just using that space? Now, in really constrained sites or very pedestrian areas, that may not be feasible at all. The other option is bringing them into the circulating area, but ensuring that general traffic and riding traffic are completely aware that that is what is occurring. So the way that we would manage that is through the use of sharrows. Okay, so once again, just encouraging riders to claim the traffic lane and push their way in front of cars, basically, and letting cars know that riders will be within this space. But shout out to those that also mentioned on the opposing side of this carriageway, riding within the dooring zone, no buffer there whatsoever. It's good to see that that has been picked up as well. The location of this one was in Tasmania. I'm not sure if I got the exact city. A few things were popping up. It's in Launceston, and I just said city, and my phone thought I said Syrian. Now it's yelling at me. Yeah, it's in Launceston. It is Elfin Road, Brisbane Street, and Lawrence Street. and it's a peanut roundabout, so it's an absolute beauty. It's good fun. I've actually ridden there, both on my bike and an e-scooter. They've got a great e-scooter scheme going on in Launceston, right up near the Botanic Gardens, near that weird zoo area. Great place. Give it a go. All right, so local roundabouts. Here we're talking a couple thousand vehicles a day. We're talking speeds. The urban default generally applies, or you've got a 40-kilometer speed zone or something like that. This is when you'd be saying, all right, well, we're probably not going to have lots of money to be building significant infrastructure. We're not going to be able to grade separate. We're not going to be able to do protected roundabout. It seems likely that we are just looking for low-cost measures to improve safety, and generally the way that this is achieved is through the use of sharrows. So you can see the sharrow there in the distance. So rather than just ending the bicycle lane altogether and that's it, job done, providing that continuity right in the middle of the traffic lane so riders feel comfortable that they're able to do that. Also providing those sharrows within the circulating area, because we don't want riders to feel obligated to ride close as possible to the curb. We actually want them to take that dominant position. It's much easier to see a rider if they're in the middle of the traffic lane than if they're hiding at the periphery. So another tip there. Should also mention, for those up north in Queensland and out west in WA, you might refer to this as BAZ, bicycle awareness zones, or on the other one, there's another name for it as well. There's a variety of different terms used for this, but using the sharrows approaching local roundabouts, quite common idea. That's the sharrows. We've talked about that one before. That's what the stencil looks like. Best practice for your sharrows is combining them with traffic calming or local area traffic management treatment, whatever you want to call it. So what we can see here is a little speed cushion. And that speed cushion is bringing vehicle speeds to about 20 kilometers per hour. Really, really good idea. Great practice is to be implementing those traffic calming devices wherever you're proposing sharrows, but particularly approaching roundabouts. Just so you've got vehicle operating speeds at a level where they can brake suddenly if there is a rider that's entering that space, or if a collision does occur, it's within that survivable level. It's not at that 40-kilometer, 50-kilometer per hour speed. It's reduced, so you're much more likely to get bike riders back on the saddle if a collision were to occur. It's still not going to be a comfortable experience, but certainly very, very good practice to install these traffic calming treatments approaching these environments. Now, my only caveat there is the way that this one has been installed is not 100% perfect, or the way that I'd recommend. You actually want to locate it prior to the merge point. You want to have vehicles approaching that conflict point. They slow down. Once the speed is off, that's when that merge happens. So you want to make sure that the conflict point is after the traffic calming treatment. But very, very effective, very good practice to include traffic calming treatments as part of that kind of scheme there. That's just another example of that being installed, but another one where I probably would have put the traffic calming there so that the bike rider can cross over, get in front, and then if the general traffic are at low speeds before they get to that conflict point. Awesome. Okay, we're doing pretty well for time. I've got a little bit more contents, and then I've got, I'm just thinking how I'll play this out. I'll do a little bit more content, and then I'll pass over to Marissa, who will just articulate what are the next steps, how do you get your certificate, how do you get that sweet satisfaction of completing the course. We'll go through all those fun little details, and then we'll do a quick little wrap up, and we might get out a little bit early. So final part of today is just an acknowledgement that, you know, what we've been speaking about within this course is very much around infrastructure, very much around speeds. We didn't touch on the topic of vehicles. Like, some vehicles are getting very clever, and they can actually recognize when there's a bike rider and apply automatic braking. They've got airbags that kind of jump out and protect the rider and things like that. The other element that I wanted to just focus on here is, I suppose, the road user elements, or the behavior of the community, and just acknowledge the role that education campaigns have. I think there's a lot of merit in doing that. So if you're at an LGA, or maybe you, I don't know, you're on the board of your kid's primary school, just some takeaways to learn how other jurisdictions have managed some education campaigns within this space. And yeah, just to demonstrate that infrastructure is not really going to resolve everything, and we need to really empower the community to understand that as well. While I'm rabbiting on about this aspect, though, I'll get Marissa just to launch the final poll of the course, which is just a bit of self-reflection. Have a good go at this. It's actually just going to be a repeat of the first question that we asked you, which is just, you know, giving yourself a rating of your own skills within this space. So while that's going on in the background, I'll chat through this one. So this is Cyclist Month, which is an annual event in California. Every June, they say that this is Bike Month, and what they do is they have lots of marketing material, adverts, they print out posters and display them in bus shelters and things like that. And it's this constant reminder to all transport users that bike riders are within the space. You know, they're using the carriageway. They are people. They're not, you know, just these invisible or, you know, angry exercise junkie people. Like, people going to school, people going to work, people go get groceries, or, you know, whatever it is. And it's just this constant reminder to the community that, you know, we need to recognize that. And if you are getting behind the wheel, then absolutely acknowledge their vulnerability. So I think that's a good way to, you know, just have that constant reminder to the community. A few years ago, you might have seen this kind of hashtag that was trending on Twitter, which was the Red Cup Project. It was a bit of a global phenomenon. Lots of different people participated this across the world, and basically all they did was they went out to their local on-road bicycle lane, and they just put down some red cups, and then came back a few hours later and checked on how the cups were faring. And invariably they got crushed, or they simply disappeared. And it's just this kind of user advocate role that was you know, demonstrating that lines are not enough. Like, line marking will not protect an errant vehicle from colliding with the bike rider. And we really need to be pushing for our protected bicycle lanes, which we spoke about in module 2, because we know that that provides a much greater level of safety. Some people got quite theatrical about the red cups, and they installed like tomatoes and apples and things like that inside the cup, just to add a bit of drama, which I've got to appreciate. This one is is more vigilante justice than anything. This is outside of New York, actually. And a fellow riding into work just got fed up of asking the council to install a protected bicycle lane. So he went to the local warehouse, probably not Bunnings. I assume they don't have that there. But went to the local warehouse and just purchased about 100 plungers and just decided to glue them onto the edge of the carriageway there, or the edge of the bicycle lane, and created his own protected bicycle lane, which is incredibly admirable. Like that confidence is insane. I'm absolutely not recommending anyone does this. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want any lawsuits. I think that's quite a feat to just put matters into your own hands. And if you're not going to build it, then I will. Unfortunately, it was not successful. Unsurprisingly, the council were not as enthusiastic as I am about this, and the council did rip up the plungers, so they didn't last. And as far as I'm aware, this tract is still unprotected, so they didn't manage to achieve that goal there. But yeah, just a little bit of fun there for you. Last one I'll just mention, I'm not going to have time to run through this video, but maybe at the end of the course, you can click on that link there. This was an ad that ran out of Scotland about 10 years ago now. It's See Cyclist Think Horse. If that doesn't make sense, then please watch the video to give you a better understanding. Unfortunately, it did not last as an ad campaign, though, because there was a couple reasons that the community were irate about. One was this bike rider was not wearing a helmet. Now, that is not a legal requirement in Scotland or in the UK. You do not have to do that, but people were still upset that she was not wearing a helmet. It was not, in the spirit of things. And also, she wasn't riding close enough to that wonderful, wouldn't be bluestone, but slate urban channel there. So people got quite upset by these factors, and it ended up getting pulled from the airwaves only like a month into the campaign because too many people were complaining. But still, I like this ad because I'm very, very fond of using humor in messaging. I think people remember ads that are funny. They're much more likely to engage with it. They're also much more likely to have a chat with friends about, hey, you see that ad about See Cyclist Think Horse? And engage with their friends and family about these issues, which are riders are vulnerable. They need to be treated as someone that is vulnerable and not just like, they're a rider, they'll be fine. Like it's important to have those conversations going on. We do have a final 360-degree video. I already spoke about this one. You'll get a chance to ride through Melbourne's protected roundabouts. Example 2 is a real good one of, I'm actually doing a right turn here. And I'd recommend as you're watching this, just to swing the camera around and have a look at the vehicle that's coming behind me. Because that's that interaction that I spoke about earlier, where I personally feel the most vulnerable and at risk. And that's the collision that I feel most nervous about within roundabouts. So example 2 is not best practice, but yeah, just demonstrates, I suppose, why would I mention that. Over to you, Marissa. Do you mind launching the LMS and chatting us through how we get that wonderful certificate?
Absolutely. Let's just share my screen. And thank you so much, Max. That was great. Okay, our LMS. We have another task, another quiz for today's module. So just looking down at module 4, we have the PowerPoint presentation from today. So you are most welcome to go back and review the slides from today's session. We'll also have the recording uploaded in the next few hours once that's ready. So you're welcome to watch that back and listen over anything that you might have missed or you would like to revisit. The 360 degree video for today, as Max has already spoken about, we've got Melbourne, a protected roundabout in Melbourne there. So just follow that link and that will take you directly to that video. Another quiz for today, like I mentioned, just the same. You can see that I have failed there, so you can just ignore that. I failed to pass the quiz, but I was just doing some testing. But you can just, just you've got you'll have an attempt button there, so you can just attempt that quiz. Only 5 questions, I think, on that one, so it shouldn't take you too long, just a couple of minutes. I'm sure you'll pass that one much easier than I did.
Yes.
And yes, so that is your task for this module. We are very keen for you to get your certificate of completion. So down under module 4, we've got feedback and certificate. We've got a short feedback form here. Just click onto that one. Just a few questions just to give us your feedback on the course. And it shouldn't take you too long. Once you have completed that feedback form, there is a link. It's an inactive link at the moment, but there is a Safe Cycling Infrastructure certificate. Once you have completed all of the tasks for the course, which include the 4 quizzes per module, and you've completed them, we do require you to receive 80% or higher on each of the quizzes. So once you've completed all of the tasks, successfully passed them, and you've completed your feedback form, that certificate will appear. And so you can just click on that link and download your certificate, and happy times. You've passed the course, you've got your completion certificate. So please work your way through those quizzes and you'll be able to download your certificate there. We do have a share your achievement little link here. If you follow this link, I'll just follow this link here. We've got a series of badges that you're welcome to use and share with your online network, just to let them know that hey, look at this training that I've completed, and share your knowledge there. So we've got, just following the link, we've got a Safe Cycling Infrastructure for Streets and Roads tab. You just click on that one. That'll take you down here to a couple of images you can use, whichever one you like. These are, we've made these handy, easy to use. You can just click on the social media platform that you'd like to share it to, and that will just directly link to your account and you'll be able to post that picture. We've also got some template words here if you'd like to use them. You're welcome to write your own, you're welcome to use ours. But if you just click on that text, that'll copy to your clipboard and you can just copy that straight into your post online if you'd like to use it. And if you do, tag us, please, so we can see that and comment, and that would be great to see. Aside from that, I think I've covered everything there, Max.
That was perfect.
If you have
Thank you, Marissa.
if you have any final questions, please pop them in.
I was just going to
The
share
chat
one
now
more
before
thing,
we-
and then I'll let everyone
Yeah.
complete the quizzes and get the certificate. In the resources, can you see my screen again? Sorry, Marissa.
Yeah.
No, sorry. In the resources, reference document and resources, we've got this. So I'd recommend downloading everything for starters, but another one I just want to shout out was Cycling 360 footage examples. You click on this guy here, and this is going to take you to a PDF. Basically, what this is, it's a library for you. So if 6 months' time you forget what a protected bicycle lane is or what a bi-directional facility is, giving you some dot points to remind you. And then we've also linked it to videos, 360-degree videos. So if you forget what a protected roundabout is, or what any of the terms that we've used in this program is, this is your little cheat sheet with some videos there that you just click on and you can have a quick refresher on what that is. We've also given you this emoji legend for you. So, if we like to see smiley faces, those are stuff that we do want to see more of on the network. And to be honest, if I'm recommending any of them to watch, just watch the ones that say please no, because those are ones that we don't want to see more of. So things like this, maybe watch that one just to make sure that you're not going to be designing any of those types of facilities. So download that, chuck it on your local desktop, go give it to your friends. By all means, it's a handy reference for you to have. Big shout out to both Marissa and Ainsley, who's been doing just wonderful work behind the scenes, getting this all together, all the quizzes, all the moderating, and just answering all the questions in the background. It's a lot of work that just makes all of this flow so beautifully, and I'm very grateful that we've got such dedicated staff working in this space. Want to thank everyone, of course, for joining as well. It's great to have your own eagerness and enthusiasm as part of this. It's great that you've shared your own experiences and, you know, sites that you've worked on and things like that. I appreciate that as well. Although the course is closing, by all means, feel free to reach out in the future. If you've got any technical queries, we're more than happy to help out in that space. Yeah, if you want any advice on your projects or things like that, by all means, that's what we're here for. So we're not just training the content, we're also very much involved in the delivery, the design and auditing and stuff like that. So if you need any help there, feel free to reach out. And final thank I want to give is to the Amy Gillett Foundation for providing this. It's been very difficult to see the dissolution of the Amy Gillett Foundation. It came to us as a significant surprise, and this is the final course that we will be running within this space. And yeah, it's been lovely to have this as a final hurrah. And of course, we'll have future safe cycling courses being run, but just not with this specific element to it. So thanks everyone for joining in. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Max. Thank you for facilitating. I can't get my words out. Maybe I'm getting emotional, but thanks for facilitating the each of the webinars and each of the courses week after week. It's most appreciative, and thank you everyone for your comments in the chat. That's been really lovely to hear. I'm really glad you've enjoyed the training, and yeah, that's it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah,
that's it.
All right.
Smash out the quiz and watch the videos, have a bit of fun, and yeah, we'll catch you all soon. Have a lovely weekend. Take care, be kind to each other, and yeah. See ya.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.